we rise as one, under one mission, our work begun.
Welcome to the Success Theory Talk Show. I'm your host, Dorothy Kamarunga. Today on the show, we are joined by the co-founder of StartHub Africa.
My name is Matthias. I'm one of the co-founders at StartHub Africa. We're an entrepreneurship hub with offices in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania.
StartHub Africa focuses on 3 core pillars. 1, we do entrepreneurship education and skilling, so supporting young people to get practical experience how to start and grow a company. Then secondly, we offer practical venture building support in tech and manufacturing. And thirdly, we offer consulting services, so we work together with development partners, with private sector, with universities, and help them to structure innovative entrepreneurship programs.
StartHub Africa's vision is that African entrepreneurs shape Africa's future. StartHub Africa's mission, what we do every day, is to support and empower entrepreneurs to build scalable businesses.
Welcome to the show. Tell us, if I was to know more about you, what in your childhood directly inspired what you're doing today with StartHub?
Wow, interesting. So, hello, my name is Matthias. I'm originally from Germany. I'm a co-founder at StartHub. I live here in Uganda since 2017. And I might not have to go as far back as my childhood, but maybe during my studies. I studied physics in Munich. I have a master's in physics. And being a scientist, I was actually always looking for what to do with my life. I didn't want to go into science and have a scientific career. So I got into entrepreneurship through entrepreneurship hubs at universities in Munich. And this is really how my entrepreneurship journey started myself. And then in 2017, I was just working on my master thesis. I and a few other people, we were 6 in the beginning, we basically stumbled upon, so to speak, the problem statement that there's not so much in terms of high quality entrepreneurship support and programs at universities here in Uganda and other East African countries. So we just Skyped up some universities, and 3 months later we were here and started to, just on a personal project basis, funded by ourselves, paid for our flights, came here to start with the universities and set up first entrepreneurship programs. So this is really how we got started very quickly. And the idea was really, hey, it helped me so much to have like these spaces in which I can explore and build this identity of I could be an entrepreneur. As a scientist, I never had that. So these spaces at the university where you're exploring yourself, where you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, with your career, have been super instrumental for myself. And that's what we started to do here. And we still do that across East Africa. We work with about 30 universities in different ways and formats, especially in Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. So this is how we got started back then. And
when you say we, how many were you?
We were 6 and now we're 2. So yeah, as I said, I mean, it's a bit of a different journey than a lot of startup founders because it really started as like a project. We all had gone through different university programs. We were from, I think, 6 people from 5 countries in Munich. So quite international, but all with the same experience of starting something through this infrastructure at the universities. And of course, as it's a project, we were all still in our studies when we started. Some people continued with studies, some started something in Germany, and so on. And 2 of us are basically committed long-term. And that's
so 2 of you are now committed long-term to StartHub, right?
That's correct, yeah.
And in the beginning, when this vision came to you, right? Mm-hmm. What inspired you, and how has the vision evolved over time?
Yeah, really, this idea of it was so helpful to us, and my personal story, and it's the same for my co-founder Laura, that we were looking for things to do with our lives, basically, right? And entrepreneurship became an option because of these programs and opportunities that we got at the university level. And this is really what all our founding story is based on, that we collaborated with business and entrepreneurship lecturers here in Uganda to build programs that work for Ugandan students as well. So this is really the main inspiration.
Which were the first universities you contacted, and was it in Uganda or in Tanzania or Kenya?
It was in Uganda. This is still our main base of operations. We now have a team in Tanzania and Kenya, but it was in Uganda. We contacted a range, and we started with 5 in 2017. So not the biggest and most well-known ones, but I would say those behind that. So for example, Chambogo was already, which is I think the second largest government or public university, was part of the first ones. 2 really good private, more Christian background universities, UCU and UMU here in Kampala, and 2 others.
And what is your partnership with these universities?
Yeah. It had changed a lot over the 8 years that we're here, and it keeps on evolving. Also, as we grow and scale, because you need to find new ways to scale impact. In the beginning, we had a model where we worked with lecturers and did like content design and co-design with them, and then they were doing these entrepreneurship programs at the universities. Then eventually we took it over for better quality control and improving all these programs. And we had people on our payroll who were going to, at some point, 10, 12 universities in Uganda every semester to run different entrepreneurship programs. By now, it's different again. So we have different modalities with different universities. One of them, for example, is that we work with universities that are interested on curriculum. This is one of the most exciting things for me personally, because if you manage to improve the curricula at the university level, that means you can reach thousands of students, and with much more practical programs, a lot more project-based learning. And this is really what's lacking at the university level, gaining that hands-on experience. It's very school-like in many cases, and it depends a lot on the lecturer. So bringing this real-life experience into the university learning, teaching, didactics stack is quite exciting. So that's one of them. Of course, that requires usually a bit more of a deeper partnership. You work together for a while, and then but we've created a few curricula that are also under accreditation and being run for students that basically push the students out and to start businesses, interview customers, so that they learn what the market needs, etc. So bringing this really hands-on learning experience. Another way how we do it is some universities now pay us actually to continuously support them or run entrepreneurship programs. Some other universities have entrepreneurship centers set up with funding from partners, and we support them to operationalize them, right? Because sometimes they don't know how to build an effective entrepreneurship center and space. There's a lot of things you need to consider, from what kind of soft support in terms of trainings, coaching, and so on do you do, but also how do you build good industry relationships? Because finally, you can't work in isolation when you do entrepreneurship, and this is a big issue. Another model is that we co-apply for funding together, right? Because we have all this expertise in terms of how to support students to build something. And the universities, of course, they have a really good infrastructure, both in terms of attracting the funding, but also the space, the access to the students, and so on. So we have a few collaborations. So basically, to sum it up, over time, it has really evolved to allow us to reach scale. We couldn't be at 30 universities in East Africa running these trainings, and it has evolved on a needs-based model because universities can be quite bureaucratic. So you need to find individual ways how to make it work in the end.
Okay, that's really nice, because actually I was about to ask you, do the universities pay for these services, or do the students pay? But I think you really explained that in detail. What gaps in the African entrepreneurial system is StartHub addressing, and why do you think those gaps exist?
Nice. I think that's a very important question. I'll try to give 3 points and a bit of background, right? Like when we talk about Africa for many years, it's all about the potential that everyone talks about. So let's break this potential down. If we think about the African growth story, there's a lot of companies that still need to be built, and who's going to build them? It's still going to be, to a big extent, university graduates that are going to be graduating over the next years. What are they lacking? They are lacking experience, right? The teaching is not super practical. We see rather little project-based learning and so on, which means there's a lot of theoretical, or sometimes also, it depends, of course, on the course, on the university, also outdated knowledge. And what is really needed in today's world, when we think about 21st century skills, is actually a lot of different kinds of skills that are not taught at universities and work experience. There are also very few internship programs. Even me as a scientist, I did a couple of internships during my studies, and that really gave me so much practical experience that I could never have gotten at universities. So in short, the university and higher education ecosystem is not set up to provide this experience about how to work, and what are problems in the market. And that's very important for entrepreneurs, right? And we see that with the university students starting ideas very often that are quite repetitive. We see them every semester again, and they are from their vicinity. So for example, hostel marketplaces, right? Because it's not easy to find a hostel once you go to campus first. So we see that idea every year, a few times. So this is just testament to what experience students have, and it's quite limited. And of course, by on the one hand, doing entrepreneurship programs and pushing them out into the market to conduct customer interviews, to do research, think of mega trends in your field of studies, where's the journey going, where are business opportunities there, you widen the scope, because that will widen the scope of ideas that will finally be started by students. So that's one area. We also have a team that is dedicated to supporting software entrepreneurs. The problems there are quite different, or software startups, and then another one in the food processing space. So maybe one thing that we want to really solve on the software side, one is still the quality of ideas. That's really hard. But I think a big issue is that there's very little places where you learn how to build it. What that leads to is that founders struggle for an extended period of time to make progress with their startup. And if you don't have savings, which most young people around here just don't have, you will run out of steam and you will have to close down. So time is of the essence. And lacking this experience, it's really hard to know how to build the fastest and best way. We see so much misprioritization, basically. I think the real issue is prioritization, and working on the most important thing every week. And that's what we can help with, right? Because if you have that experience from the outside, you can come in and help someone to prioritize in a better way, to help them make faster progress, which means they will generate cash faster and can survive off it faster. So that's what I would describe in the early stage tech space, especially for first-time founders, as the biggest problem. In the food processing space, to give a third and quite different problem again, it's about market understanding as one of the key issues, but also operations excellence. Let's look at those two and how we can work on them. Market understanding, what we see is there's a lot of food products that are being produced that are not really suitable for the local market. They're too pricey or not appealing to the local market. So we're deliberately trying to support founders in this space that create food products, fast-moving consumer goods for the local market. And it's either products that are already available, peanut paste or porridge or honey, where the market is quite saturated already. So it's hard to have a competitive advantage. And if so, then the founders don't really think of what else does the market need. This leads to issues, or then the products are quite expensive because they're homemade and people don't understand that the price threshold that they are putting based on their production, maybe the level of quality that they are putting, which is good, the production mechanisms that they're using, it just won't work in the local market and the product won't move. So people with more experience would maybe tackle product selection and coming up with ideas differently, right? You might interview customers. You might go to supermarkets and see what are imported products that I could replace and make cheaper locally. And there are some very interesting ones if you go into supermarkets where you have purely imported product categories that are super expensive and you actually have good raw material supply here. then you of course have to figure out production. And I want to mention one example, which is we call them the quick beans. They are basically pre-boiled beans. We have a few processing steps in between, and people here love beans, right? But the cooking time is like 2 hours. Yeah. So busy young people, you would not go home and boil beans for 2 hours in the evening for dinner because it just takes too long. So with certain processing, the boiling time can be brought down to like 15 minutes. That's the time that it takes you to make your rice on the side, and you have a nice meal that people actually enjoy, right? So thinking of it from the customer side is something that's definitely missing.
So once I grab my quick beans from the supermarket, I'm able to boil for like 15 minutes and it's ready to eat.
Exactly.
That's pretty interesting.
You can add some onions in the end or fry them a little bit or prepare them in different ways. But yeah, basically in essence, that's it.
That's very interesting. That's a very interesting idea.
And I think that's what I mean, like with founders often not so much looking at the market. And maybe to wrap it up, the second problem was on the operations excellence, especially if you're in such product lines. You need really good operations here on the ground, both for sales, but also for production, quality assurance, and so on. We've struggled with local founders that suddenly stop producing because they feel they want to now for 2 or 3 months again do product development, or the quality just went suddenly down and there were issues with the product. So of course, if we help them to distribute that to hundreds of supermarkets, we need to manage the relationships with the supermarkets. So if their operations are in that way, it really affects us.
I really love the quick beans idea. I've not even seen anything like that in Uganda, but I've seen it's kind of similar to like baked beans. Baked beans are more ready to eat, but these ones you boil a little more. Like
exactly.
Noodles or something.
They're not in sauce; they're actually dry, so you will boil them. Yeah, exactly. But the idea is similar, right? Like baked beans, it's like you have it in your can, you prepare it, done. Right?
Okay. What example of a startup or a success story can you share with us that best represents StartHub?
Nice. Let me draw from the tech side. We have a few companies that I find very exciting. So, for example, one company is called Nexa AI.
Nexa.
Nexa, yeah. We work with
Can you spell that for it?
NEEXA.ai.
NEE?
Yes. XA. Yeah.
.ai.
Yeah. I work with the founders of Nexa for like 3-4 years, right? This is testament to like our long-term work with them, with the founders that we have. And they first started to automate marketing agency work, right? So to help with easier generation of flyers, etc. And then they had basically also company clients who they served directly with semi-automation of a lot of the things that an agency does, so they could offer it at a much lower price as a basically digital agency. And as for like the last 2 years when AI became more viable, they had found that the biggest issue of a lot of local companies is actually not so much on the marketing side, but it's actually on the selling side. What they really want is conversions, because having all this content on social media only helps you if you make money out of it, especially as a small business, right? Sure. And they actually struggle with converting because they don't have the staff, and they are lacking basically the skills or time to effectively convert the leads that all this marketing on socials would give you. So they started to build a solution for local businesses here that helps with automatic conversions. So it's similar to AI chatbots that we all know, even on WhatsApp, on web pages and so on, but it's much more human-like. It's not like these standard responses that frustrate you, but it is trained based on each individual company's data, and based off that data, they can sell you actually, right? And consumers nowadays, they're very jumpy. If you want to buy a certain item and you're on the website of that company, if you don't get a response immediately, you might just go to Jumia or to any other site or call someone who knows someone who has that product, right? So with this solution, basically customers get responses immediately. As I said, it's trained on prices, on how to sell certain items, the specific value propositions, and so on. All that can be customized together with the client. And then they can sell and convert directly right there in your WhatsApp where you're texting, or in the chat interface on the website. They have email follow-ups and can integrate all this customer data that is incoming and contact data into a CRM so that the companies can do follow-ups. So they are really automating conversion. And it is especially interesting for, again, FMCG companies or companies that have consumer goods and selling to individuals, especially for slightly higher value items. So one of their first customers is Purifier. It's a water filter system here for home usage, which can cost like $20 to $30, depending on the size. And they do direct to consumer. So they also sell through other channels, but it was hard for them to always timely convert the clients and respond to them. So now with the solution, suddenly they really saw the conversions go up. So that's a good example. They work a lot in the education space. They have several clients across the continent, even Nigeria, West Africa, etc., that use their solution because, of course, they can lose a lot of money quite quickly if even one student doesn't get the responses and doesn't sign up for a study program, right? Mm-hmm. That can quickly be thousands of dollars over the study period. So paying for a software subscription, a few $100 or $1,000 a year, almost immediately pays off. And those universities or more professional schools, they've gotten a lot of benefit, even kindergartens and so on. Mm. So they will really benefit from this solution. And I think it's a good example of solving local problems, and also a good example of good founder profiles. Like the CEO was running a normal traditional marketing agency before, mm-hmm. and he has a CTO who's really strong. So these are the kinds of backgrounds that you really need in the tech space. So that's a good example. They're making solid revenue. It's not been easy. They've bootstrapped completely without external investment, aside from ours. Mm. But right now, the growth is really accelerating, which is pretty exciting. Another interesting company also on the tech side is called ShareCart. What they do is they basically build a data layer in the agricultural space. So imagine you're a producer of manufacture or an agro-processor. Let's say you make oil from seeds. You probably work with some outgrowers, farmers that bring you, I don't know, sunflower seeds or sesame or avocado or whatever you use to make your oil. And you probably have field agents who go to these farmers to maybe provide seeds, who help them with agricultural processes, and also track the progress of the farms if they have produce when it's ready for harvest, and collect that produce. And there is almost no digitization in this whole process. So they mapped everything from the last mile farmer up to the manufacturer through their system. So as a manager, you can now on your online dashboard design workflows. Please go to this farm, get the location, take pictures, interview this person, write down these answers, and take a voice recording, walk through the perimeter of the farm so that we know how big it is, etc. And all this data then consolidatedly comes back to your dashboard, and they're doing pretty well right now.
The company is called?
ShareCart.
ShareCart.
Yeah.
Oh, that reminds me of when I had some salespeople and I would tell them to do exactly what you said. And I wish I knew there was software that can do that.
Yeah.
And every time I would tell, when you go to the field, I'll manually take a picture. Yes. Take like proof of concept.
And then it's in your WhatsApp, which is so annoying, right? And it doesn't scale. Imagine you have to work with 5,000 farmers now.
Yeah.
Good luck, right? It just doesn't work. And it works offline as well. And they have found interesting things with their clients. For example, that the field agents, often they just invent that data. They take the money that they got for fuel to reach the farmers, use it for themselves, and just never did the work, right? Sure. And of course, once there's a system, you have all that accountability. So that's pretty exciting, and they are scaling. They've done some good fundraising. That's going on as well.
Problem being solved right there. I can see myself using that software because I'll tell my salespeople, go to a client, take a picture, take a number, post in the WhatsApp group for the company, so we all know you've actually grown. But sometimes they actually invent the numbers, or they just go on social media, they get the numbers, and you keep asking them for the pictures, and they'll be like, no, I mean, we couldn't take the pictures. They said no.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I think that's a brilliant.
And even then, you have it on WhatsApp, and it's so hard in a structured way to do things with this data and information, right? In very small scale, it works, but once you have more robust operations or more larger scale, it won't.
Sure. You want to share more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we've worked with literally thousands of entrepreneurs. These are companies that we also invested in, so we work very closely with them for a long period of time. And I work especially on the tech side. So, of course, I have a lot more depth on that side. Maybe one other example on the tech side. In Kenya, I was there recently. We did some boot camps. We're right now working with a company, super early stage. I find it quite exciting. They've built an AI tool to analyze skin health. So you can do quick checks and so on, and then periodically scan it. And I think it's a problem that a lot of people around here have. And you can then get product recommendations. So they're starting to work with brands that actually have good products. There's a lot of bad skincare products. So you, if you're not an expert, it's hard to know. And like this, you can continuously track how your skin is doing and improving, while at the same time getting recommendations based on what the issue is. We're right now working with them through testing the business model more robustly. This is a very early stage, right? They started this year. And this is really also our sweet spot because almost no one is working there. When we talk to investors, they all say we don't have investable pipeline. They get hundreds of applications for funding, but the really investable and good businesses in the pipeline are just not there in almost all the countries. And this is really what needs to be built at this super early stage, which is also the costly and very time consuming part of building the startup, right? So it's not worth it for investors. But I think that's, in terms of skills and how we work, that's really also our sweet spot.
And just to get more details, for maybe an entrepreneur out there that would like to be a part of StartHub, how do you work with these entrepreneurs, like these founders? Do you take a share in the company? Like, what is the what are the nitty-gritties that, you know?
Nice. So we have different modalities. In the tech team, yes, we take a small stake of about 5%, and we do investment and it's long-term support. So we have experts in our team who work with the founders.
A cap of like the financial support you might?
Yeah, it's fixed amounts, but we can give add-on loans. Okay. So usually it's below $5,000 what we give in total. I don't think we have maybe one company where it was more, because it's this early and we're not primarily an investor, right? Investors get money from other people and then invest in the companies. We use our own profits to invest in companies, which of course doesn't scale so much. We can't be putting out that much money from our profits. We're not that big yet, right? So that has limitations, but we have skin in the game, and this is important for us, and it really changed how we do startup support. And I think this is one thing that I always recommend, for example, when we do research work in ecosystems, that also entrepreneurship hubs and supporters do more, either as the individuals, the founders and so on, angel invest and invest in the businesses that you actually support, or as organizations, even if it's tiny money, but you will look at how to do good founder support in a very different way if you have that skin in the game and if you put some money there.
And are there any criteria for like startups that you actually give this kind of partner with or give this kind of?
I think very similar to what investors at later stages would also want. There is no fixed checklist, right? Because especially in tech, startups are like successful startups are complete outliers in terms of the personalities, in terms of how the founders execute, but also the ideas must be pretty good. So it's really case by case. And the things that you look at in the beginning is mostly the founders. So that what experience do they have? And this is where it's really hard for university students because of what we talked about, right? That was our thesis in the beginning, that we will be able to build pipeline from universities. But it turns out, nope. At the universities, you can help to build that experience so that in the future they might be better founders. So the founders' work experience matters a lot. Like I talked about, 2 cases that we already invested in Nexa and ShareCard. Both of those founders actually were running agencies before. So they had this work experience, they knew how to sell, they knew how to handle client relationships, etc. That's super important. They had started something, so you know that it's not new, right? They're not used to regular paychecks. It can still work. I'm not saying that's a no, but where are these things in terms of unique experience? Do they understand the problem really well and that there is a problem? If you're building tech for marketing, it helps that you ran a marketing agency, right? But also, can the founders execute? Are the founders really smart? Another thing that you want to see, and that's a big issue often, is can they build the product? That's really a yes, no, because if you don't have a good technical co-founder and you don't have a good answer how you will build the product, then it's basically automatically a no. It's almost a must, especially if you build something tech heavy. There are tech solutions that are not as tech heavy. There you can get away with it maybe, but otherwise it gets so much harder because you will have to hire to get that really good developer on board. They're expensive, even in this local context. And they're not as aligned to your success. They're not as committed. They will not easily work Monday to Sunday in the beginning as founders do. So having that technical co-founder is super important. So we like to work with techies. And then market and the quality of the idea is key. We actually don't look much at product because that's something that's easier to control. If you have great founders who understand the market, building product is anyways iteration, and we can help with that. But really the market, and if it makes sense, so we do some rough calculations ourselves how big this can actually be, because I think very often founders just don't understand the market dynamics and the opportunity, how it really is. And yeah, these are the key things. Founder market, in short. So that's for tech. So maybe, you asked more broadly, right? How can founders engage with us? Yeah. That's one. If you're trying to build a tech startup, approach us. We look at every idea. We're quite selective, so we probably got around 100 ideas this year, and we took in 2 new companies only. 2? Only 2? Exactly. Wow. But I think it's a pretty normal ratio, and the quality of the ideas is often just not good enough, right? It comes back to what I said before in terms of the ideas. So how do you know that an idea is good enough? Are there like three things, or is it your gut, or how do you test that? I think when it's really about the idea itself, I really want to easily be able to understand why someone would pay for it and pay... Why the customer? Yes, exactly. Okay. Like it must be like, oh yeah, that's really a problem they would have, and they would put money on the table to solve it. Right. For the 2 examples that I gave you, you were immediately like, oh yeah, that's actually an issue, right? Yeah, so you want to feel that, because otherwise, if you have like what they call a nice to have idea, then you're always going to be chasing people and trying to convince them to buy something that they don't really want. And for me, that's a pain. I don't want to do such kind of work. But even if you work with founders, that's just, right? It's very hard. Like I couldn't even tell them, yes, we can help you optimize this idea, because they will still be selling something that's really hard to sell. So I think that's one of the most important things. So do you have a strong value proposition for your customers? And it's okay if the founders don't understand that. We can help with that. But if we cannot either take the theory of you as a founder, why it would work and why customers would buy, and if we can't develop one of our own, then it's tricky. And mostly in the African market, I find that people are a bit more, the consumer habits, people are a bit more rigid. Like if it doesn't make sense immediately, they're not willing to give it a try. Try something new. So if you don't have cash is scarce, even for businesses, not only consumers. You want to share something more about how people can engage with StartHub? Oh yeah, sorry. I mentioned that there's 2 more ways. One, because we invested in companies, we built a arm that does financial and tax and compliance support, right? Because where we had our investments, we wanted to support the founders to have better books of accounts, to be compliant and so on, because you need that if you want to fundraise, if you want to build a big business. So we eventually spun that out and built a basically, you could say, accounting service firm. And we have a few really professional expert level accountants and tax experts who work with founders and businesses. And we're quite different than the usual accounting firm because we understand businesses actually, right? We don't approach it from a legal and compliance side only and help with everything that you need for your statutory compliance, but we understand what are healthy margins, what financial data should you gather, what are good metrics to track as a business to optimize business performance. So we have clients, very small clients that pay from $50 a month for these services. They don't even have an accountant maybe, and we help them with all their financial operations, up to clients that pay almost $2,000 a month that work across different countries, who we have helped to save tens of thousands of dollars because we help them optimize some of their operations. We've helped them in their fundraisers with all their investor reporting. We've helped them build better procurement structures. We've helped them hire finance professionals. We provide the founders with this external scrutiny on what's happening in their finance departments, which is very important for growing businesses to keep the money together. If you are not a finance professional, especially, it could be tricky to really evaluate how good the quality of your finance team is, right? So we can do all these things with the experts that we have as a service, and that's open to anyone. We can do even free business analyses and needs analyses on these topics.
You can do free needs analysis.
Yeah, we can do an hour consultation and then we interact, right? Because people need to build trust and see that we know what we're talking about. And at the same time, this already gives us an idea of what the company really needs and what kind of services they would require. So we can add value there. So it's not a must that you then sign up for continuous services, but that's something that we can do. Okay. I think once companies make $2,000-3,000 a month, they should latest start to really professionalize this, and this is where we can start to add value. But we work with companies that turn over almost $1 million a year as well, so on the very high level as well. And I think this is where you might find so many things that need optimization and where we can help to streamline a lot with this expertise from the outside. So that's open to everyone. And then maybe lastly, we talked a little bit about FMCGs, food products, and that we do food distribution. We just started a couple of months ago and growing that aggressively to help entrepreneurs that are in this space to get onto supermarket shelves more easily. And we're always looking for good and interesting new products that consumers would like, that would move fast in supermarkets. So if you're a founder who has a business that's mostly in Uganda for now, that sells to supermarkets and consumers, it could even be something that is not a food product, as long as it can move well in supermarkets. Reach out and let's have a chat. We will connect you to the team running the distribution, and maybe we can push your product out into the market.
So for all the entrepreneurs out there, I hope you will thank me later. So you touched on fundraising.
Yes.
Like funds, money, finances is something that entrepreneurs struggle a lot about.
Yes.
How is StartHub helping entrepreneurs fundraise? How are you helping them get money for their projects?
Yes.
Secondly, there's something that actually I remembered when we were texting. I was like, I want to come take the entrepreneurs there, because in my mind I'm like, maybe the entrepreneurs here, I'm going to like see all the products. Then you're like, there's something that you say that actually kind of moved me, and you're like, actually we have mostly tech companies, and also the thing that entrepreneurs need the most when they're starting out is not space.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
Okay, yeah, super interesting. I shared something on priorities in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And that's something that I see very often with very early stage founders. Like there's still this mentality to be able to build a business. What do you need? You need a nice branding, a design, you need an office, but it's just not true. Almost no business needs an office to get off the ground. It's just an expense. An office is not an investment. And you can operate. We didn't have an office for a couple of years as we started, as we bootstrapped and based on our own money. You will find places to sit and work from, right? So what we also see in a lot of co-working spaces, the people and hubs that have this model that they rent out desks and so on, the people that actually rent these desks, they're not founders. They're either more established companies that use such facilities as a more affordable shared office opportunity, or NGOs and companies such as that. But it's not the founders. And the founders usually then they are sponsored, like some donor or so pays for their seat in that space. So we never wanted to be a landlord, as we say, because I believe that's just not the problem that needs to be solved for founders. Their problem is not, I don't have space, that's why I'm not building a company, right? We talked about a few of these issues.
That way.
Yeah, but it's never the case. I mean, name me one business that will be more successful because they have an office as opposed they don't have an office. Like, what is the value for your business of having an office? It can build trust.
Yeah.
But the assumption is, and I've seen it with many founders, you will find your early adopters if you have a good product. And there's other ways to build trust. Let them use it for free for 2 weeks. If they get value, they will pay you for it, right? Sure. If you're actually building something valuable, you don't need an office to inspire trust. And I mean, the founders can still come here. We have a boardroom that they can use. Actually, the companies that we invest in, they're allowed to sit here at this office for free. But we have one of maybe all of our portfolio companies who does that, which is just testament to it's not what they need, right? If they have important client meetings, they can come and do it from here. It maybe gives a bit more credibility and so on. That's good, yeah, for sure. But I don't think space is a major value proposition and a major thing that founders need. It can even just be a super unnecessary expense. So if anything, we advise against it.
And then what about fundraising?
Yes.
Funds. How are you helping entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
Because most of them, me included, when I was starting out, I always felt like I can do everything, but I don't have the money to do this. I don't have the money to do this. How do you help entrepreneurs, with finances, but also the mental capacity to not be limited by the money in your hand?
Super good question. And it depends a lot on what kind of business we're talking about, right? This is very different for a micro entrepreneur who's not building a scalable business. They will probably just access small loan facilities if they need them. And the needs for that are very different. What they have to have in place for this to make sense are different than if you talk about a high growth tech company or a manufacturing company. The use of funds is different, hence the capital structure is different. So it's really super contextual. I'm generalizing now when I say the following, that, and this is a very unpopular opinion, everyone says access to funds is the most limiting factor in the ecosystem. I don't believe that.
Yeah, many many investors say that.
Yes.
But the entrepreneurs say the opposite.
Yes.
So it's like, where is the sweet spot?
So I take the investor side here. And once again, I'm generalizing, right? There's a lot of founders that really are up to something and they still struggle to get that cash and to find that money. So there is, especially in the early stage, there is a lack of risk capital for sure, and a lack of culture of investing in such asset classes and a lack of such support structures. At the same time, I still disagree that the biggest issue for this ecosystem is access to funds. We talked a lot about the quality of ideas and how many of these companies that apply to our programs we reject, right? And this is not because they don't have money. And we can help to resolve that. This is really the quality of ideas, maybe the readiness of the founders, the experience of the founders. It's just the general setup that is not there. And yet, if you talk to those founders, they need money. Of course, they need money because they're struggling. They're already working on something. They're struggling to survive. But there is a difference between needing money to survive, right, as an expense, and being able to efficiently deploy money as an investment so that it will yield a return. Or to, of course, in the beginning, you will experiment a lot, and that's normal, right? But to invest it in something where it feels like there's at least a good shot that it will have a good return. And I think this is often missing. And where founders say, I need investment, what they mean is, I need means to survive further, right? Which is very different. And actually being able to use capital efficiently requires you to have a certain level of proof. And this proof could even be in terms of having talked to clients or knowing this industry and knowing that there's a problem where people would say, oh yeah, this makes sense. If we build this, we can probably make money, right? And I think this is where founders should focus on more in the beginning, especially because it is so hard, even when you have a good idea, to fundraise. So what you should focus on is actually to put all your things in order so that it gets easier and easier for you to fundraise and to have a good story to that investor who could be interested, right? Like make sure that you have a great theory for your business model and why it would work, where someone else who listens would easily say, oh yeah, this is a big problem. I actually see that, I've experienced that. I can see this work if you build it. And if you don't have that, I would not be chasing money, maybe chase those grants and so on. There's a lot of risk in that. I'm not the biggest fan, but yeah, I don't think it's the biggest issue. I think the quality of ideas and businesses that people are working on is still on an ecosystem level, especially in tech right now, what I'm talking about, but maybe also food products. We talked a little bit, right, about what you need to have in place. Is it something people can afford? Is it something that actually solves a problem to consumers that they would be excited about? Yeah, these are the biggest challenges. So for those that are ready, how do we do it? I think fundraising is a lot about connections. So in the tech space, we know a lot of investors and have really good networks. This could be from individuals who could put in something like a few $100s or a few $1,000s if they like the business and the founder. And we have done it a couple of times with a few businesses. And at the same time, then also we have good relationships with institutional investors. Here in Uganda, the issue is basically no investors are based here. There's one VC, venture capital firm, that's based here. At the same time, they invest Africa-wide only into fintechs. They have one investment in Uganda. The rest of the investments are in other countries.
Why are people not investing in Ugandan startups?
People are, but they just the firms are not so much based here, right? Okay. Which just makes it harder to fundraise because the pipeline here is very small. The investable pipeline for investors is way smaller than other ecosystems. I would say Uganda definitely is a top 10 startup ecosystem on the African continent. If you look at fundraising data from the last few years, it's in the lower end of the top 10, but it's in the top 10. But the ecosystems are dominated by the top 4 countries. So in the East African region here, you will find basically every investor being based in Kenya. And it's just not as accessible. Because you have way more pipeline there, right? You have way more talent there. And that's what people are looking for. You have the ecosystem events, the ecosystem generally is much stronger, but investable pipeline, right? You need to be close to where your possible pipeline is. So you will rather be there than in Uganda. The same way you would rather be in Uganda than, let's say, in Burundi if you do tech startup investments, right? Which seems obvious.
Yes, like when I've been living in Dubai for 7 years and oh my goodness. Yeah. It's so easy to get like in capital for anything there because the ecosystem is well built. Yes. People are so open-minded. Mm-hmm. People are looking for the next big thing. They are just willing to experiment. Yeah, it's a bit a challenge in Uganda, but how can we improve that though?
Yeah, it will just improve by making the ecosystem better. There needs to be more investable pipeline coming in that super early stage, right? Because as much as investors that invest 50 or 100,000, which are small tickets, dollars, say they don't have enough investable pipeline, they would invest in more if they see that pipeline here. It's the same for us at idea stage. We don't get enough good funding teams that we can help to boost and then access those investors. So maybe to finish answering your question from before, what we do is we have these relationships with also VCs, and we can easily go to them if we have a good startup that we can vouch for that is ready. And this is really super important. We don't want to make random intros with companies that are not ready, because if I send a startup to an investor, they will trust me that it's a good startup that they would look at, or that they would send to another investor that they know, right? It's a very tight community, so you can't mess it up. So I really only want to make good intros where I'm like, yep, this could be really a good fit for you or for someone else, you know? And we can do that, and we can, before that, get the startups ready so that we have the confidence to introduce them, right? Like helping them make progress, make revenue, show traction, show monthly growth, build out the business model properly, and already put a lot of these question marks out of the way and build good answers through the operations that we have. And then you're more and more ready. And then we have those networks. And that's the second reason why I would say investment is not the most important thing. It's more about strategically putting everything in place that you will need to tick the boxes of an investor. I want to share one anecdote. When I run fundraising trainings and workshops and boot camps and so on, in the beginning I always lead with two questions. The first one is, who in the room wants to raise money from a VC or angel investor? And usually like 90% of the hands go up. The second question I ask is, are you building to own or are you building to exit? Meaning, are you building to own this company and run it for the rest of your life? Or are you, do you want to build it and sell it in 5 to 10 years? And almost everyone always puts their hand up on building to own. So what that shows is that people just don't understand how investors work, right? Because no VCs cannot make money. Their business doesn't work if you don't sell your company. They get a stake, and the only way they make money is if they sell the stake in your company to an acquirer down the road. They will never make enough money through dividends and so on. Like that, it's completely impossible. Basically, that means founders haven't done their homework in understanding how even these investors work, and what they want to see and what they need, and into what stories and metrics they might be interested. So I don't think capital availability is the problem. It's the founder preparedness. Because all those founders say, oh, it's so unfair, there's no capital for us. It's almost entitlement that there should be someone who invests in them. I don't know if that comes from decades of development support, where it's more like, yeah, we are here, like, give us, I'm doing something nice, right? And this needs to flip completely for founders that seriously want to build successful companies.
So most venture capitalists, even angel investors, most investors generally want to sell the company at some point. Is that
everyone who invests in stake, in equity shares, basically, right? If you invest in shares, how are you going to make money from shares? You own those shares, now what? How are you going to get cash? Only if you sell those shares. So they will only make money if those shares appreciate in value over time, right? In 5 years, they are worth 10 times the amount at which you bought them. Then you make your money. How else are you going to make money? The company doesn't have to pay you, right? Like if I have shares in that company doesn't have to pay me anything. Yes, if they cash out dividends and I hold 5%, I get 5% of those dividends. But these are the profits that the company cashes out, and founders can always decide to just pay themselves higher salaries. They don't have to cash out dividends ever. So I can make money from that. Right? So as long as it's equity investments, that's the only way. And if you don't want to sell your company, don't get into venture capital, because they will pressure you to sell your company and to build a high growth company, because if it doesn't grow very fast, it doesn't gain enough value for it to be worth for it to be worth it for the investor. That's what I mean by capital is not the problem, it's the understanding of what you have to do. And even if you want to get into that game, I'm not even saying that everyone should raise venture capital. It's a very specific asset class that also puts a lot of pressure on founders. I mean, if you can bootstrap and build a legacy business, that's beautiful, even if it's in tech, right? Credit works very differently. If we talk about, for example, more consumer goods, that's what also people are more used to and know, right? You just have to repay with an interest. That's pretty well known. But I think when it comes to high growth tech businesses, because VCs don't invest in capital heavy companies like in food processing for that same reason, because it's very hard to make good money off those shares eventually. There is an argument to be made that it can be possible, and there are ways, and private equity does that, but usually for more established companies. So in the beginning, you have to figure it out. Either you bootstrap, or you do it based on savings, or you get loans or grants to get to that point. But you need to deliberately think about how you will be raising that investment and where you get that capital from.
So the founder, and then StartHub, then the venture capitalist, right? When you merge these two people together, do you take a share in the founder's company, or do they pay you for the service?
Yeah, we take the share beforehand when we start to work with them, right? Okay. very early stage. So even at this idea stage, right, or they have a bit of revenue, some of those companies that we work with, that's where we come in. We work with them, as I said, like on a weekly basis. We even go to the field with them. Like it's all around support to put all these things in place, but also to prioritize. We talked about that, and to build faster, basically, right? And that's a massive saving for founders, because even if we can help a founder build their business 3 to 6 months faster, right? Think about it 5 years, 10 years down the road. If they reach that 3 months faster, that's a lot of revenue in those 3 months that they make. So yeah, that's how we do it, and then we support them with the fundraise. Yeah, so we don't only make the intros. There's a lot of things. Of course, negotiations are really tough.
Very tough.
And it can be extremely stressful, especially if you have low cash. There's a lot of terms in contracts that founders don't know. There's a lot of best practices that founders might not know. And an ecosystem like here, who do you ask? Who has built a successful tech startup and raised money? You have maybe a handful of people who you could actually ask for advice who actually have gone through that. So there's few places where you actually get the knowledge around it. So helping with all these negotiations, getting all the documentation in place, setting the data rooms up, preparing good pitches, talking about how to position themselves for investors so that the storyline is compelling. All these things is what we do on a needs basis.
That's very interesting. How do you ensure that your programs remain relevant in the tech landscape on the continent?
Super good question. I mean, it's a fast and quick evolving space. We need to have the right people, right? We are in the business of working with founders mostly one-on-one. So we need the right team on board, and the team needs to keep learning. The right team also means that these are individuals who want to keep learning. They actually, they get deeper and deeper into different sectors, topics, trends, just on their own. That's not even part of their job. It's just the right individuals will anyways do that. Of course, we need to build better networks to investors. We need to build more resources around founder support, just to be able to give them more value.
What role do partnerships, both locally and internationally, play in the mission of StartHub?
Super good question. And the reason is that we tried to partner a lot in the beginning, and over time we noticed that actually partnerships are not that easy to do well, because if there's not a clear win on both sides, it will fade away almost always. So I think people overestimate the importance of partnerships in the early stages of organizations. In the early stages, it's all about finding your identity, doing a great job, or building a great product if you're a startup, and so on. There is a few cases where partnerships already then make sense, but it needs to have this win-win dynamic. If you don't build this win-win dynamic out, then people are just putting time, and eventually they ask themselves, why am I doing it? At the same time, as you grow, there is certain things. We talked about investors. I even would say this is building networks, not so much partnerships, but there is a win-win element, right? Like, it's good for us if we can connect our founders, and it's good for investors if they have more people who send them pipeline, especially pre-vetted startup pipeline, because that's what they need, right? So these are not even formal partnerships, but these are still, they work transactionally. I mean, with a lot of investors, I still have a really good relationship. We can go for dinner, we can have good conversations about this and that and so on. But yeah, this is really what we're looking for. And other things are then, once again, quite transactional. And I don't think this is a bad thing. Mm-hmm. You can have a great relationship with someone in a transactional way. Let's take the retailers to which we distribute products, right? Mm-hmm. You can call them partnerships, you can call them relationships, you can frame it in another way, but it's very transactional, but it's still something that helps us a lot in extending our reach. And I think on a high level, how I would think about it for us trying to support entrepreneurs is we need to build relationships that are valuable for those founders, right? The more possible clients or organizations where we can make intros we know and have, that's good for our founders, right? The one place where I think real partnerships, where we have real partnerships in that sense, is with the universities, right? Also because we rather put money in than make money out of it. Sometimes we charge a little bit, but it's really not something where we are looking to optimize for profits at all. And this is really also where we have this win-win character. And the win for us is really on the impact side. It's something that we want to do and deliberately want to do, so we can invest some staff time and some resources to do this kind of work. And of course, the university side benefits from being able to offer this to their students, that there are good entrepreneurship programs and structures at the university, and they can make sure that their staff and lecturers and so on also learn from it and maybe improve some of the teaching methods, especially in the entrepreneurship space.
So currently you have how many universities that are partnering with you? Because I was very impressed when I walked in and I saw the board and I'm like, whoa, this is a lot.
In East Africa, around 30, I would say. Some of them are sometimes on hold for a bit because, as I said, it really depends on the relationship. Do we have a program to run right now? But over the last 2 years, we have done different things with around 30 in East Africa.
And can you give us more depth on creating an identity? I found that very interesting when you were speaking. I feel like, even me personally, I have really struggled. I can wake up today and I'm like, what am I all about? What am I selling? And then I'll like go through a lot, write a lot, but then I'll still push it aside, like for later. And it always feels like this is not urgent, this is not important. But I feel like it is one of the most necessary things. Even before you start talking to, let's say, potential clients or even people, because what are you going to tell them that you do, and how can they buy from you? What should an entrepreneur do to create an identity, or how important is it for an entrepreneur to first build an identity for their product or service?
I think it's basically the most important thing, because when you're small and you're starting off, you don't have much in terms of resources, right? The one thing where you can outcompete those that are already in the space, the larger companies, is by going deeper, because they operate a certain business model at scale. So they're very operation and optimization focused. In the beginning, you can really solve new problems or problems in a much bigger way. And the only way you do that is by going super deep and becoming narrow in a space that could be big, right? Narrow in the sense of you go deep, you try to only nail one thing, be laser focused, because it's so much better.
I do digital market. You can go and say for these companies or for this niche.
And that's a very hard strategic then choice. And that's what I would call the idea, right? Because just saying I do digital marketing only for food businesses doesn't mean that there is an actual need. So you need to pick your niche where you're an expert that is also valuable, and that makes strategic sense. Don't just pick a random niche.
So give us a live example from from your entrepreneurs.
Maybe let me pick an example that everyone knows, which would be, for example, Airbnb.
Okay.
So there's a really good, the founder tells stories from their early days a lot. And one of their most important things in the very early days was to find 100 people that really love them, right? So to optimize this weird service where they heard a million times, no one wants to sleep in the places of strangers, right? Like it sounded weird to everyone. So what they needed to do is to build like almost this cult around what they're doing. And it's so much easier. And this is in any space. And I've seen it over and over again. If you have 10 or 100 people who are basically your best marketeers. They use your service. They love it. They love to host people. They love to go to other people's places and stay there when they travel, for example, because they will tell their friends, right? If you have people who just kind of like your product, right, you haven't gone deep enough and really built it in a way that it solves the deepest problems and really works well for a narrow segment of people, you don't build this excitement around it. So this is really the best strategy, and it helps you build identity in the sense of you need to understand your users insanely well. We always say you need to understand your customers way better than they understand themselves. Because customers often don't even understand why they buy a certain product, especially consumer, right? But there's really good explanations that I could tell you why someone is spending 3 or 4 hours on TikTok in a day, right? From a product design perspective, from the biochemistry in your brain, everything that influences why people get hooked to these products. But consumers don't understand that very often, right? They just do.
So why are people spending more time on TikTok?
No, there's a bunch of reasons, but all these social media platforms especially are built really in a way to make you completely addicted, right? And there's a lot of different triggers. It really bases on neuroscience basically, and hooks into the basic ways how our brains work. And there's triggers that come at the right times. There is social processes that are at play and that make you addicted. So there's a book called Hooked, if anyone is interested in building products really for consumers. That is amazing. It's just, I think the subtitle is Building Habit-Forming Products. And it's really about designing products that work for users. And this is, that's on the product design side, but for building this identity, I think what you really want to, before that, get to is know which problem you're solving insanely well and understanding every small detail around it. And you as founders becoming the expert, because this is what the big guys can't do, right? You're the CEO, you can, like the founders of Airbnb went to apartments and took the pictures themselves because they realized that the pictures are too shitty on the websites, right? And this is how you test, how do we get people to actually book that apartment? What are the small things that we can do to really build this customer love? And this is something that the CEO of an established company will just not do. They're too busy for these things, right? So this is your opportunity as a small company. You go deeper and you do something way better than the big guys because they can copy you. But if you actually have figured out things, non-obvious things, right? This is not about a feature or where you put the logo on your app or so. This is really about understanding the user experience and the value that you're giving them and the problems they face and the frustrations that they have and so on in a lot of depth. So this is really why I think you need to build this identity early on and know exactly what you want to do. And it's an iterative process, honestly. I think our vision statement changed like 5 times over the years because we understood the problem better and then we refined what are we actually after, right?
I used to have this problem to feel like if I have this slogan, then I cannot change it. If I have these brand colors...
No, you can. Why can't you? Who tells you that? There's no law.
I used to tell myself that.
You can change everything.
Are always scared to do because they feel they have this like perfectionism syndrome. Like I need to be perfect from the get-go.
And I think, especially in a society where you're told a lot of things on how to do it, there's strict rules, right? In childhood, at church, in school, at university, in your first job. Like there's so much micromanagement, so many clear rules. And I think people need to break out of this. There's like a million ways how I see this affecting progress of businesses, right? Yes. So one thing that we often hear, for example, people are very worried about the ideas or about the IP, right? We need to protect our name, right? You don't have a customer, you don't make money, but you need to protect your name because, that's the name of your business, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to, and it's not of value. Even big brands like Barclays changed to ABSA, right? Did they lose accounts? No. I think there's this Sadolin Blaskon story where there was a rebranding and people I think
Postbank, Power Bank.
exactly. The Saarlouis Plascon case was very interesting because I think the brand name was bought by an inferior quality product. So they thought, okay, we get this great name, so people will now buy our product. But people went back to the other product that then traded under another name because it was better, right? So product quality in the end trumps, right? It's not the name that is the value. It's the actual product. People will see it and people will feel it. And that's what you need to focus on. And entrepreneurs need to break often with these patterns, what they call truth, because very often it's just wrong and they have to unlearn. And I think good entrepreneurs are good at challenging assumptions and things that they thought are true, and just take bold new decisions based on new findings, new data, new reasoning.
But I think in Uganda there's this, I don't know where it came from or how it started, but there's this need for people to belong, right?
Yeah.
So even when I started out like Success Theory as a brand, I literally had to move. I had to leave the country.
Yeah.
Because I felt like everyone was telling me, oh, those things are not going to work. Why don't you just get a job? Everywhere you go, like, they cannot understand. Your own mother, your own parent, everybody just is discouraging you. So I just felt like my mind, but then coming back, still I feel I'm getting attacked again. And it's like, oh, I thought I was out of this kind of thing.
Yeah, no, building something is hard.
Easy, like,
and especially for women, right?
women?
It's even much harder, right? Like when we talk to women, for example, university students that are starting a business on campus, like the stories they tell us, what even their aunties getting into their business and telling them not to start this business, to find a husband and get married or get a job and so on. And this is a bit less for men because it's more okay for men to risk things, to try things, to start a business and so on. And women face much more social pressure even than men. It's also men do. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's easy for men,
but it's
always hard. Yeah, exactly.
Depending on the kind of culture. I grew up in a home where we were all empowered as women to do whatever, but still we were limited by those other expectations of you should be married at this age, or even other people's fears are being projected onto you. So if my mom did not succeed doing a couple of businesses, she is looking at me through her lens. Yeah. She is telling me it's not going to work. Yeah. Better get a job. Yeah. Like, it's crazy. Yeah. When you're like, come on, if you could see through me, if you could get it. Yeah. No, but they're not going to do that. So.
And I think to an extent it's okay. I agree. And almost every entrepreneur faces it. And why I'm saying it's okay is because the good founders, for them, it's a calling. It's not like a rational decision. I might make more money in the future, so I should do it, right? Like it's the founders I know, and especially the good founders, it's like, there's no other option, right? Yeah. Why would I get a job? Like,
today I was actually watching Shopify's, an interview for the Shopify founder, and he was saying that he had done, is it law in school? And then he left the law, degree, and was like, I feel like I want to create entrepreneurs. Yeah. Entrepreneurship is my calling. This is it. There's nothing else I can do. And I'm like, oh, really? So, because some people will be telling, are you making money? Sometimes, like, when I said, like, uploading my content online and all that, and people would be asking me, I wish I could talk in Uganda. It's even funnier. Like, they'll be like, does this thing make money? Like, okay, yes, it's going to make money, but I don't know when.
And people will stop saying things once you're super successful. That's the only thing, right? Like, so you have to be, to an extent, stubborn, and you have to have this conviction, and some people do and some don't. It can develop over time. I don't think entrepreneurs are born. You can build this identity. You can do that and so on. It needs to fit in your situation in life, right? Like, sometimes it's easier for younger people because they have less commitments, no family, no kids. Sometimes it's easier for older people because they have more experience, knowledge, can start better, have maybe some capital. But you need that conviction because it is going to be tough, and most people will not understand what the hell you're doing.
Never. Yeah. I looked for that validation. I didn't get it until I was like, okay.
And financially, you will always be worse off than having a nice job if you had it before and so on when you start. So it takes a while, right? It takes a good while.
Scaling startups in Africa often requires like complex regulations. What is StartHub helping in this area?
Yeah. So first, it's with the game plan, and it's almost the same for every type of company that wants to internationalize. It gets a bit different if you don't need local operations. So if you just can sell software in another country, it gets a bit easier. So what's the game plan? The game plan is first prove that you have value in your home country, or directly move to another country, right? If you think Uganda is not the best market, Kenya would be way better, just move and build from there immediately. That could also work, but in the first place where you're building, prove value, make revenue, have sustainable margins, and so on. Especially if you have physical products. We shortly talked about that already today. But also for tech, first figure out your home market so that you know what you're scaling actually. Why is it complex to scale? It is because there's 1.3 something billion people in 54 countries. So if you go to another country, you need to register, you need to probably be on the ground, you have different tax laws, different regulation, different data privacy regulation, and everything changes, right? Or not everything, but a lot of things change, and you won't know that because no one is an expert in all these markets. So you have to figure all of these things out. It gets more costly, and so on. The other thing that's hard when you scale is that a lot of companies, it depends on your business model and who you're selling to, but most companies' best approach will be to scale from capital city to capital city or major city to major city, right? So here in Uganda, if you are established in a capital city, let's take a company that's well known here, SafeBoda. It's basically a marketplace for ride hailing for motorcycles. Their first scaling efforts were not to secondary Ugandan cities, but for example, to Nairobi in Kenya, right? Because the market is just too small if you go to other cities in the country or even to the further suburbs. If you take Uber, they're also not available in other cities in Uganda, right? So there's also a market problem beyond the regulation problem when you think of scale and especially internationalization. So often the game plan is get established and then pick the next most viable major city that you can scale to where the context is similar or the same, and you need to look at costs and regulation as well. So you need to look at your future plans, your scaling strategy, what is the strategic market that you need to enter early. So that's really case by case. So how we help with that is, on the one hand, with these strategic discussions, when is it the right time to go to another city, another country? We can help with evaluating certain markets, especially where we also have offices. So as we have someone in Kenya, a Ugandan founder wants to explore that market, at least we have people on the ground who have networks who can help with market entry topics. We had to do it ourselves, right? All the regulatory things, registering companies and so on. So we probably have some hacks. But it's really needs-based. There's some companies that sell to clients abroad. If you sell pure software, you don't need a local presence or a registration somewhere. So yeah, it depends. But we can support full service until someone is there. But the founders need to figure it out. And maybe one other word, as much as markets are similar, they're not the same. I think SafeBoda, when they first went to Nairobi, they failed because of that. And not having a deep enough understanding how the motorcycle market is actually different in Nairobi than in Kampala. Yeah. And it feels the same when you're there because you see motorcycles everywhere still. But the reason why users use motorcycle is different in Nairobi than in Kampala. So you need to really, as a founder, be on ground and understand these markets well.
That's pretty interesting. How do you measure the social impact of the startups you support? Yeah,
very good question. I think it's not that hard in the end. Because if you have a startup that has a product that is good for their customers and users and solves their problems, right? Let's take away products that could be harmful because we would not work with such founders. If you have a good product, basically the impact comes from more people using the product, right? Which means more customers, which means more revenue. So revenue growth for any business that is not trying to have systemic impact, but which has impact through the product that they sell, comes through scale, So if you help them to build a scaling and successful business, you're maximizing the impact. That's the thing that makes it easy when you work through such an impact avenue. Systemic impact is very different. And very often it's also much harder to make money. What do I mean by that? Let's take, for example, universities that we work with. Systemic impact would be to work with universities to improve how entrepreneurship education is done every day within these universities. So this is really systems change, right? You need to go into curricula, you need to go into how didactics and teaching is done. You need to introduce things like project-based learning. So it becomes much more complex, and the path to scale is very different because you can't just sell more. So there it's harder and very contextual. But for normal startups that we support with, in basically every case, the more revenue they make, it's a good proxy for the impact that they have. Of course, there's other ways how you can measure impact as a player in this entrepreneurship ecosystem, like the funds raised by these companies, the jobs that they created or have. But even that scales with revenue, right? So revenue is just the best driver, I would say, for showing how much impact you're creating and how much value for customers, because someone only gives you a certain amount of money if they get a certain value from it. So it equates to value creation in the end.
What trends do you see? No, actually, before we go there, I wanted to touch on the fact that you say revenue is actually a measure for impact. I've never thought about it that way, because I think this still goes back to culture and mindset, like the mindset around money, where people always say, oh, it's not about money, you need to help people. But how do you find the sweet spot between the amount of money that a business is making and the impact? Like, I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, I think it's that easy. And I think there's a lot of people that are starting social enterprises and they have doubtful business models. We see that all the time, that will not scale. So what's the path for them to scale their impact? Either they raise more grants to do more of certain community-based activities, or they actually build a viable business model that creates value for their users and customers that they're trying to impact, or a secondary user, so that they can scale this, right? And in the end, you will have more impact at larger scale, which means you need to bring the money in. And either you bring it in through your product sales or you bring it in through grants, but then you're not a social enterprise or a business anymore, right? So in the end, your impact will, to an extent, be proportional to how much money is flowing into the organization, even if you're completely impact focused. So yeah, and this is, I think, the struggle of a lot of social enterprises.
So much.
That they try to optimize first, and still it's good in terms of the mindset and the approach. I mean, it's the same for us, actually. Our biggest mistake, if you asked, or the one mistake, is not to go get better at sales faster. Because once the money came in, we were actually able to do better work, right? To hire better people, and so on. So this is really what these small social enterprises should also focus on first, because if you have that revenue model that actually reliably brings the cash in, and revenue is also good proof that you're actually doing good work, because otherwise people wouldn't pay you if you're not actually solving their problems, then they have a more clear pathway to scale. If you don't have that, how are you going to scale? If you have a lot of impact, but no way how to get money in based on that impact, how are you going to scale?
That's how entrepreneurs end up running themselves in like a ditch, because they're trying to say, I'm a good entrepreneur, I'm doing good to the community, but are you doing good really?
Yeah. And it might be unsustainable for the founders, and the business impact will not scale. And I know there's some people that would criticize me a lot on this. I changed my mind on this. I think when I advise social entrepreneurs, I advise to really focus on building a viable revenue model if this is your path to scale, and not raising grants. Just focus on that fully in the beginning. Because what I've seen in also more long-term conversations with them, they hold those values of creating impact so dearly anyways. And this is still important, that they keep doing that. This can still be part of the advice as you build the revenue model. Keep the impact at heart, but focus on building the business first. Because if you figure out building the business, scaling the impact is easier. If you just focus on impact for 3 years, you might be completely broke and haven't yet figured out how you will actually reach scale.
And you might also not be very motivated to keep doing what you do, because every time
life needs come.
I need this, but I don't have the money. So I think that has kind of switched something inside me too. So what are the trends that you foresee in the next 5 to 10 years that might be taking over the entrepreneur landscape on the continent?
Interesting. There's a lot of things, and it also is very sector dependent, right? There's a lot of trends. Maybe if it's really on the high level ecosystem, I think I'm pretty convinced that the ecosystems will get better based on more investment coming in, but also all the support players like us being measured based on how well they support their startups to grow revenue or raise money. And I think I start to see that, where questions are being asked, okay, which startups from your programs have actually raised money or grown big, right? And sometimes there are very few answers. I mean, of course, there's also hubs who have like 20,000 success stories, and these are sometimes only people who came to one of their events for one evening, right? It's not like they help to transform these businesses. If you ask the entrepreneurs, they wouldn't say that we benefited from that. So that happens a lot. There's a lot of issues around that because donors sometimes don't do this level of due diligence. So it's tricky, but in the end, I think hubs and support partners will have to offer better services and support to founders to stay relevant. And these questions are being asked more. So more money coming into the ecosystem means that investors will say, oh, with this hub, I can't work. And I talk to VCs that say, hey, I tried to get pipeline from hubs, I don't get any. So I built my own pipeline. So investors coming to Uganda, they don't talk to hubs. That's what they tell me. They're like, no, I've tried that a couple of times. It's useless for me. They just built their own networks, and they know certain individuals in the tech space and so on that they can ask, and they build their own brand to build their own pipeline. And this, of course, this detaches hubs and investors even more, which means the pressure might even get higher. So if hubs eventually are just not relevant to the success stories in the ecosystem, more questions will be asked. So I think that's a good thing.
What would you say your success formula is as a co-founder of StartHub, or as a person in general? What is your success formula?
I think in the end, and it sounds maybe cheesy, it's all about integrity. Because if you want to build something that scales, you have to be able to keep your word. And you have to, it's easier to also build an organization and lead a team if people can trust you for your word. And when you take decisions, they will be more on board. They will say there's a good reason for this. And for example, the culture that we're building is very much based on transparency. So every one of our employees knows our revenues, knows our cost structures. They don't know the individual salaries of other people, but they know exactly how much money we're spending on salaries every month and every year. They know exactly how many months of cash we have on our bank account, and so on. So building like this organizational culture where we are one organization, even if we have all these different teams from financial services, tech, working with universities, implementing consulting projects, we're pulling one rope together. And I think really communicating actively and walking the talk has been insanely important. And also to keep good people, right? I think the biggest success factor in the end is people that you have, right? Of course, in the beginning, it's the founders, but over time, we're more than 30 people full-time, and they are doing most of the work, not me, right? Mm-hmm. Of course, there's certain things that I do and certain guidance that I give here and there, but most of the work hours are not done by me. So you need the right people, and you need the right structures and processes and culture so that people do the right thing. And I think what's organizations often struggle with as they grow is that the number of people goes up and the quality goes down. They might be really good as they are small because the founders have all this conviction. But how do you build these structures and processes and culture and the right selection of who you get into the organization so that even as you grow, the quality still rises every time, right? Like growth should still come with that. I think we've done pretty well in that, and that has been key. And I've seen a lot of organizations struggle. And yeah, I think it's something that's very underappreciated also for how much time founders put into thinking through building culture, building processes, building management.
What is your long-term vision for StartHub Africa, and what milestones do you want to reach for the next phase of growth?
Yeah, so as I said, we have these specific focus areas where we are really trying to support entrepreneurs. And this is based on also our vision, which is African entrepreneurs shape Africa's future. So we see that there's insane potential in the private sector and local entrepreneurial activity. People who understand the problems, understand the communities, understand the environment to build businesses that solve problems and that build better products here. We don't have to import everything. It can be made here, right? And this is also the pathway, or one great pathway to economic growth, to wealth and prosperity. And we want to do that by supporting founders with structures that they can tap into to help them have unfair advantages as they build those amazing future companies, right? So as I said, in the food space, we are building up distribution structures. So if you're building a great food business, that's a big unfair advantage against other competitors to enter the market much faster, to have access to all those clients and so on. So we do that in the different areas where we work through high quality services. So what we will definitely be doing is to add more necessary quality support structures. This can be anything from distribution structures to access to investors, to access to important networks, to quality support infrastructure that we can provide, like our financial, tax, compliance services that are otherwise hard to access or more expensive or not as good. And all of these building blocks that we build over time will enable us to impact more founders to build large businesses that can shape the future of the continent in the way they see it, right? And that's the important thing, especially also for me as a foreigner here and as a guest in Uganda and in East Africa. It's really about, this is why it's also a particular phrasing, African entrepreneurs shape Africa's future, right? I can provide support on how to build a business, but they have the vision, they have the idea, they know the communities, and they execute and implement and do it the right way that they see. What is our long-term goal? I already mentioned that revenue is a great measure of success for measuring impact, right? So we have a goal for 2033 of having supported 100 companies to reach $200,000 in annual revenue, basically from ground up. So we basically, and we're measuring that quite differently than so many or all the other players in the ecosystems, because we're only counting companies that also say, yes, you guys had a significant impact on my business journey. So they need to confirm and consent that actually they got support that was paramount to their growth from us. I think we have around 50 companies on our shortlist. So we have from all the programs, boot camps, coaching activities, and so on. We basically check, okay, which are the companies that have the highest potential? We put them on our shortlist and we track them. We offer them, we're just structuring that further. We want to offer them further support over the years. Some small discounts, for example, on our financial services and other things. This is really where we see we can make a big difference, help to have companies that otherwise wouldn't have existed or succeeded or been way slower in getting there or even given up to make it in the end.
And what is your final message to entrepreneurs out there?
There's so many things to say. It's very building is a conviction. We talked about this, and I think founders and entrepreneurs should write that conviction and solve real problems and do things the right way. I've seen that over and over again when founders start to become entitled and mess with partnerships because they think, now I've made it, I'm making some small money. It always turns out bad if you destroy relationships that you had and so on. We had cases, and it always goes bad. So do the right thing, do it the right way. So be compliant, be ethical, and uphold high integrity standards as you build. Just because others don't do it doesn't mean that you shouldn't. And all the large companies and the successful ones, overall, they are much more likely to have had very high standards to themselves. And then just build good value for the users. Don't tire in asking questions of what you could do better. This is something that can't stop, ever. You need to get better every single day, because real progress comes from fixing or improving one thing 100 or 1,000 times. That's when you build something really good, right? Every product is always work in progress, and the best companies in the world do it, right? Companies like Google change their search algorithms, but also the user interface thousands or tens or even hundreds of thousands of times in a year. And they run experiments on how to improve things. And everyone needs to build this iterative mindset and this deep conviction about building value for your users and doing things the right way.
Wait. The last
Wrap up.
So, where can entrepreneurs out there, I'm sure many of them are in the audience, perhaps watching, where can they reach out to StartHub to get to know more of the services that you offer?
Yeah, nice. I think the easiest way is through the website, starthubafrica.org. I think you find us pretty easily if you put
The
StartHub.
website is?
starthubafrica.org, one word, .org. But if you just put StartHub or StartHub Africa on Google, you will find us up there for sure. We have a WhatsApp chat button. Those requests are answered. Just tell us what you want. I often get just hello messages. Those ones eventually might not all be answered, but if you tell us what you need and what you're looking for, every answer, every message will get an answer. Our email addresses under which you can reach us are there. So reach out through those channels. That's the best way.
Thank you so much for joining us on this segment of Success Theory. It was such an insightful conversation.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you for the work that you're doing in Africa and in East Africa.
Yeah, thanks for your work. It was super, super interesting. I loved the conversation. Thank you.
And that was all we had for you on this segment of the Success Theory talk show. I remain your host, Dorothy Kamurunga. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Success Theory TV. And I'll see you in the next episode.